The Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA, officially defines a speech and language impairment as a communication disorder such as stuttering, impaired articulation, a language impairment, or a voice impairment that adversely affects a child's educational performance. This impairment is actually two separate but related disabilities. There are three related terms with these impairments: communication, or the process of exchanging knowledge, ideas, opinions, and feelings through the use of language; language, or the rule-based method of communication and use of the signs and symbols by which ideas are represented; and speech, the vocal production of language. One or more of these terms may be affected by speech and language impairment. A speech impairment exists when a person's production of speech sound is unintelligible, is unpleasant, or interferes with communication. There are three types of speech impairments: articulation problems, where speech sounds are flawed; fluency problems, or interruptions to the flow of speech; and voice problems, or the unusual pitch or loudness of a voice. A language impairment disrupts communication and accurate understanding of messages, the intent of communications, and social interactions. Language impairments are not necessarily broken down into types, but categorized as the aspect of language where the problem exists: syntax, semantics, or pragmatics. Speech and language disorders often coexist with learning disabilities, with an estimated rate of 96%. It can also be present with emotional or behavioral disorders or with developmental disabilities. Since the government only allows for students to be reported in one special education category, this may not be a child's primary reason for receiving services. It is important to understand that when speech and language is developing in young children, there isn't a specific age where skills need to be met. Most often, milestones are presented as an age range, for example, 12 to 18 months. If the child takes longer to develop the skill, they may have an impairment or delay and should be assessed by a speech and language pathologist. Teachers should also note that English language learners may be slow to master their second language. This does not necessarily mean that their language development is impaired. However, they may not be identified due to observations of informal conversations between children. English language learners may have mastered the pragmatic aspect of language with their peers, but may not fully understand the syntax or semantics. Similarly, different dialects are not impairments. They are a result of cultural, historical, social, and regional influences. Students may be misidentified as having a disability due to their linguistic background in addition to the biases of the evaluator. They may also fail to be identified for the fear of being discriminatory. Teachers should be aware that children may feel frustrated that they cannot understand others or make themselves understood, and they may act out, act helpless, or withdraw. In the classroom, students with speech and language impairments may prefer working with adults over their peers. They may ignore the conversational input from their peers and, in turn, be ignored. Speech and language is the foundation for nearly everything we do as humans, and it begins as soon as we are born. When a person has a defective instrument for sending or receiving information, the communication process fails. Teachers should have a few tips, strategies, or instructional practices in place in order to meet the needs of students with speech and language impairments.
In the following slides, I will explain tips and strategies for students with speech and learning disabilities. Working with a speech-language pathologist during the preschool years can be very influential. Early intervention is a helpful tool to get a young child evaluated to receive these services. Using visual schedules will help to demonstrate expectations and to assist with transitions. The use of different modalities when presenting information will help to visualize the content for the student. Allowing students to fully express themselves without interruption will increase their likelihood of complete thoughts. Refrain from filling their gaps and completing their sentences to ensure improvement. It may be necessary to exaggerate and use gestures when helping a student with a severe receptive language disorder understand the meaning of a word that symbolizes an object or an action. Depending on the age of the student, it sometimes helps to involve the students in selecting the strategy that works best for them. Activities such as conversations, discussions, radio or television broadcasts, puppetry, telephoning, reporting, interviewing, telling jokes and riddles, book reports, and role-playing can be used to develop oral language activities. As some students may have to attend speech and language therapy sessions during school time, try to ensure students will not always be missing out on the same subject or activity. You don't want the student falling behind in a certain subject. An understanding of sentences is difficult for these students and often present in the classroom with difficulties in following instructions and poor oral comprehension. Give simple directions in sentences to provide students with experiences in understanding sentences. Have the students repeat what they heard back to check the understanding. Use a slower speech rate if necessary, as this facilitates the processing of information. However, it is important that the speech rate is not too slow as to lose the continuity of the message.
We start learning speech and language skills as soon as we are born. The inability to communicate effectively can be very stressful. Children with speech and language impairments can get frustrated when they cannot get their message across, so they often stop trying. How might you reach out to that child to help alleviate that frustration?